Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we look at what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now today I want to talk about Russia and the Western sanctions introduced by Russia and then slavishly followed by their vassals and useful idiots in the G7 and the EU. Now 2024 marked 10 years since the West introduced the first anti-Russian sanctions after Crimea's reunification with Russia after the Maidan coup in the Ukraine. Since then, tens of thousands of other restrictions have been introduced, counting on the complete collapse of the Russian economy and the strategic defeat of Russia. But the effect's been quite different. At first the Western sanctions were local. They were more of a political gesture. They provided for the freezing of assets and the introduction of visa restrictions on individuals from the Russian leadership and the large Russian companies. Russia was excluded from the G8, where even before its participation had been mostly decorative, with the most important issues discussed by the US with its useful idiots, without Russia's participation. Then the West began to reduce contacts and cooperation with Russia in various fields, but then the pressure began to be exerted on Russia's technological development. Western investments into infrastructure, transport, telecommunications, energy, oil, gas and mineral extraction were banned. The export to Russia of specialist equipment for the Arctic, deep sea, shale oil and gas extraction was banned. There was another attempt to limit Russia's gas and oil revenues through exports. In 2014, following Western pressure on Bulgaria, the South Stream gas pipeline project was cancelled. Russia then redirected the pipeline under construction to Turkey, and it became the now very successful Turk Stream that fuels the Balkans and all the way up to Hungary. And if the fight against the construction of South Stream was justified by the need to protect the interests of the Ukraine, which could lose the income from the transit of Russian gas through other pipelines, then the construction of another Russian gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2, was waged by the US administration in the interest of American gas-producing companies. There was also the geopolitical goal in mind to pull Europe economically away from Russia and weaken it as an economic competitor to the US. The EU went along with that and its destruction, siding with the US and breaking up with Russia, much to its own detriment. Just look at it now. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, SCOBRICSinsight.com, to further develop it. And you can do this by making a small donation, which is done by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me. Now, on the Nord Stream, in 2019, US President Donald John Trump imposed the first sanctions against the construction of the pipeline. As the construction progressed, the sanctions were tightened. Technically, the pipeline was filled with gas and ready for operation on the 29th of December 2021. However, Germany's stalled its certification. It was never completed, and of course after the special military operation that was frozen. Then on 22nd of September 2022, one of the strings of Nord Stream 2 and both strings of Nord Stream 1 were blown up by unknown individuals. But compared to what happened after the start of the military operation, all this turned out to be just a warm-up. US President Joe Biden promised to rip the Russian economy to shreds, and the West believed he'd succeed. Von der Leyen, President of the EU, said the Russian economy would be in tatters. Tatters, I tell you, says Alec Mercouris. Much has been done, of course, to sever all ties between Russia and the West. Now, here's a clear example of the restrictions introduced at the time. In the autumn of 2015, when the supports of the power transmission line that supplied Crimea with electricity from the Ukraine were blown up at the time of reunification with Russia, Crimea was still 80% dependent on energy supplies from Ukraine. So the question of building thermal power plants in Crimea arose. However, the German company Siemens refused to supply turbines for these plants. As a result, Russia sent turbines destined for other plants in Russia sent to Crimea. And of course that all caused a big kerfuffle. Almost all Russian banks were then cut off from international SWIFT payment system. Russia's gold and foreign exchange reserves worth more than 300 billion were frozen. Thousands of personal sanctions were announced against Russian politicians, officials and businessmen. Sanctions were imposed on the Russian payment system, MIR, and transaction in Russian gold and diamonds were banned. Russian gold was not allowed to be traded with the London Bullion Markets Association. That's from one of the largest producers. Russia's the world's second largest gold producer. The West introduced sectoral sanctions, not against companies, but whole sectors of the Russian economy, particularly energy and financial sectors. Now, the export of high-end products, machine tools, chips and a range of construction materials to Russia was completely banned, as were luxury goods and cars. In Europe, external management was introduced in a number of the subsidiaries of Russian energy companies, and a number of Russian companies either had their European assets effectively confiscated or were forced by sanctions to sell them for a pittance. Gazprom Germany is a very good example of that. Exports to Russia of goods and technology for use in the aerospace industry were banned, and that's despite Russia still sending astronauts, American astronauts into space. Now, the EU and the US completely closed their airspace to Russian aircraft, although Russia had the last laugh about that one, as it has crippled Western airlines flying to Asia by reciprocation in closing their airspace. Western airlines have been hit with massive losses, and the Chinese are laughing chocolate biscuits. To limit Russia's oil revenues, the G7, the EU, Switzerland, Australia set a price ceiling at $60 per barrel, but as usual that didn't work. Instead, Russia sold its oil to many other countries at prices way above the price ceiling and developed a shadow fleet of tankers to deliver the oil supplies. Companies from the G7 countries that are banned from providing insurance, transport and financial services if it's sold above that level. But of course, Russia just avoided all of them. As is usual, all of these measures, Russia found a way around them. It implemented import substitution strategies and circumvented every single measure of the sanctions that have been implemented. In the end, all these measures have failed and Russia has continued to prosper while the economies of the EU and the G7 have gone down the toilet. All of this was done with the open slogan of the Western politicians of weakening the Russian economy, impoverishing the Russian citizens and inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia. Now, it's very obvious that the strategy of the US to separate Russia and the EU have succeeded, but it's not the Russian economy that's been destroyed, but the Europeans, and Russia, on the other hand, has continued to prosper. So, there we have it. The 10 years, the failure of sanctions. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. If you want to help me out, click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen and make a donation. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.